My name is Phyllis Jones. I'm 27 years old, and there are still days when I feel like my life split cleanly in two, before the lie and after it. I'm using a throwaway account because even now, after everything I've rebuilt, there are parts of my past I don't like touching. Some memories don't fade, they just go quiet, waiting for the wrong moment to resurface. This all started with my ex-girlfriend. When I found out she was cheating, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just asked her to tell me the truth. I remember thinking that honesty, however painful, would be the worst thing that could happen. I was naive. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She panicked. And in that panic, she made a decision that would destroy my life. To cover her cheating, she told people I raped her. Not one person at first. Not a rumor whispered in confidence. She told almost everyone we knew. Friends, acquaintances, people who barely knew us but loved drama enough to pass it on. She painted herself as a victim and me as a monster, and the story spread faster than I could even understand what was happening. I was arrested. I can still feel the pressure of the handcuffs on my wrists, the sound of metal clicking shut like a verdict already delivered. I remember sitting in that small room at the station, staring at the wall and thinking, my parents will come. They'll listen. They'll know this isn't me. The police eventually released me. There was no evidence, no proof, no case. But the truth didn't matter anymore. By the time I was free, my reputation was already dead. My parents disowned me. They didn't wait for a trial. They didn't ask questions. They didn't even look me in the eye long enough to hear my side. To them, I was a rapist who had gotten away with it. The accusation alone was enough to erase every birthday, every scraped knee they'd kissed better, every report card they'd once been proud of. My mother told me not to contact them again. My father didn't say much. He didn't need to. His silence was heavier than shouting. Most of my friends stopped talking to me. Some blocked me outright. Others sent one final message, carefully worded, distant, polite. I don't know what to believe. I can't be involved in this. I'm sorry. Sorry didn't bring my life back. My college barred me from attending classes in person. They'd email assignments and let me come in only for exams, as if my presence itself was dangerous. Walking onto campus felt like walking through a courtroom where everyone had already decided the verdict. There was only one person who stood by me. My best friend Ethan helped me, quietly, secretly. He knew how bad things were, but he also knew that being seen with me could ruin his life too. Sometimes he'd drop groceries at my door before dawn. Sometimes he'd text just to make sure I was still breathing. I hated needing help like that. I hated feeling like a burden. But he was the only proof I had left that I wasn't completely alone. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. Every street felt hostile. Every laugh felt like it was about me. I couldn't stand living in a place where my name had become synonymous with something vile. So I ran. I left town with almost nothing. I worked whatever community jobs I could find, cleaning, stocking shelves, night shifts that left my body aching and my mind numb. I scraped together enough money to rent a tiny apartment in a place where no one knew my face. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, I realized something unexpected. I couldn't stand my own name. Every time I saw it, on mail, on forms, on a screen, it dragged me back to that accusation, to the girl who lied, to the parents who abandoned me. My name no longer felt like mine. It felt like a brand burned into my skin. So I changed it. People think changing your name is dramatic. For me, it was survival. It was a way to put distance between who I was and what had been done to me. When the confirmation letter arrived, I held it with shaking hands. Saying the new name out loud felt strange, but it didn't hurt the way the old one did. With that small act, I started over. I made new friends, careful friendships, light and uncomplicated. I enrolled in university again, convinced that finishing my degree might help me rebuild my life. Looking back, it buried me in debt and exhaustion. But at the time, it felt like proof that I still deserved a future. I pushed through. I earned my teaching degree, and when it was finally over, I didn't celebrate. That's when I decided to leave the country, far away, on the other side of the world. I didn't know then that this decision would save my life. I only knew that staying meant suffocating, and leaving was the only way I could breathe. I had no idea that my past wasn't finished with me yet, not even close. When I landed in my new country, the air felt different. That sounds dramatic, I know, but it's the only way I can describe it. It wasn't just the climate or the accent or the unfamiliar streets. It was the absence of history. No one here knew my old name. No one had heard the whispers. No one looked at me like they were trying to reconcile my face with a rumor. For the first time in years, I was just Phyllis. I rented a small apartment, nothing fancy, but clean and quiet. I found a teaching job faster than I expected, and when I stood in front of my first classroom, chalk dust on my hands, students waiting for instructions, something in my chest loosened. They didn't see a headline. They saw a teacher. I threw myself into work. Lesson plans became my anchor. Routine became my shield. I stayed late grading papers, volunteered for extra duties, said yes to anything that kept me busy. Silence was safer when I was exhausted. But trauma doesn't disappear just because your address changes. There were nights I'd wake up with my heart racing, convinced I'd heard my name shouted the way it used to be, angry, accusing. Sudden movements still made me flinch. If someone stood too close behind me in a hallway, my body reacted before my mind could catch up. I kept people at a distance, friendly but guarded, smiling but never vulnerable. I told myself that was just being smart. Then I met Noah. It wasn't some dramatic, cinematic moment. No sparks flying across a crowded room. We met through a coworker, coffee after work, casual conversation, nothing loaded with expectation. What struck me wasn't charm, it was patience. He listened without interrupting. He didn't pry. When I went quiet mid-sentence, he didn't demand explanations. He just waited or changed the subject, like he understood that some doors aren't meant to be forced open. The first time he reached for my hand, I pulled back without thinking. I froze, bracing myself for irritation, for judgment, for that familiar look that said, "What's wrong with you?" Instead, he stepped back immediately. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have asked." No one had ever apologized to me for touching me before. That terrified me more than anything else. We took things slowly, painfully slowly. Weeks turned into months, and somehow he never made me feel like my hesitation was a flaw. I didn't tell him everything, not even close. But he knew enough to understand that trust wasn't something I handed out freely anymore. Even then, I didn't fully trust him. I hated that about myself. I hated how my mind kept whispering, "People can flip overnight. Love doesn't protect you. Being good doesn't save you." Sometimes I'd catch myself watching him, waiting for the moment he'd decide I was too much trouble. It never came. When I finally told him pieces of my past, not details, not names, just the shape of the damage, he didn't ask what I'd done wrong. He didn't ask for proof. He just said, "That shouldn't have happened to you." I cried in his car that night, hands shaking so badly I couldn't unbuckle my seatbelt. Eventually, our quiet turned into something solid. We moved in together. Not because it was expected, but because it felt right. Because the apartment felt warmer when he was there. Because for the first time, sharing space didn't feel like a risk. I still struggled. Sometimes if he touched me unexpectedly, I'd flinch. Sometimes I'd fidget when he stood too close. Trust lived in my body differently than it did in my heart, and my body hadn't caught up yet. But he was patient, relentlessly patient. When we got married, I didn't feel like a fairy tale bride. I felt like someone stepping onto thin ice, hopeful, careful, aware of how easily things could crack. And yet, the ice held. Then came the twins, a daughter and a son. The first time I held them, something in me rewired itself completely. I looked at their tiny faces and knew, without question, that I would burn the world down before letting it hurt them the way it hurt me. Motherhood didn't heal my trauma, but it gave it a purpose. Noah's family welcomed me like I'd always belonged. They didn't interrogate my past. They didn't look for cracks in my story. They just loved me and my children without conditions. Sometimes I'd watch them together and feel a strange ache, remembering what a loving family was supposed to feel like. I thought I was safe. I thought I'd outrun everything. I didn't know that the past doesn't always chase you loudly. Sometimes it knocks, and sometimes it knows exactly where you live. Our life had settled into something almost boring. The good kind of boring. The kind people don't post about online. Weeknight dinners. School lunches packed the night before. Toys migrating from the living room to places they absolutely did not belong. Noah humming off-key while washing dishes. Me grading papers at the table while our twins argued over crayons like it was a matter of international diplomacy. That night started the same way. Our son was sitting beside me on the couch, controller clutched in both hands, completely absorbed in a racing game on Noah's old PlayStation. Noah was outside with our daughter in the garden, her laughter floating in through the open door. I remember thinking, briefly, stupidly, this is it. This is the life I almost didn't live. Then there was a knock. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. Just firm, deliberate. My body reacted before my mind did. My stomach dropped. My hands went cold. 1,000 irrational thoughts crashed through me at once. Wrong house, delivery, neighbor, nothing. But my chest tightened like it already knew. I stood up slowly and looked through the peephole, and the world tilted. It was my father, older, grayer, standing on my doorstep like he hadn't thrown me away years ago, like he hadn't chosen silence over his daughter, like he hadn't let me disappear without looking back. I don't remember deciding to slam the door. I just remember the sound. The sudden violent crack echoed through the house, and my son startled, dropping the controller. His face crumpled in confusion and fear. I'd scared him. That snapped me back to reality. I scooped him up, my hands shaking, and carried him to his room, forcing my voice into something steady as I told him everything was okay, that it was just a mistake, that Mommy needed a minute. I called out to Noah, my voice breaking, and told him to bring our daughter inside. My father knocked again. And again? Each knock felt like a hammer against my ribs. I broke down. I didn't even try to stop it. I crouched on the kitchen floor, arms wrapped around myself, breathing like I'd run a mile I didn't remember starting. Every emotion I'd buried, anger, fear, grief, disbelief, came rushing back all at once. Noah found me like that. He didn't ask questions. He knelt down, pulled me into his arms, and held me while the knocking continued. When I finally managed to choke out, "It's my father," his body went still. He knew enough of my past to understand what that meant. Noah stood up, walked to the door, and opened it before I could stop him. I heard my father say my name, my old name. It felt wrong in his mouth. Noah didn't let him finish. He demanded to know why he was there, why he thought he had the right to show up unannounced, why he had followed me across the world after years of silence. My father looked smaller than I remembered. Not weak, but diminished, like someone who had aged faster than time alone could explain. He said he needed to talk to me. I told Noah to let him in, not because I wanted to see him, but because I needed control. I asked Noah to keep the kids busy in their room, to make it seem like this night was normal, to protect them from the version of me that was about to fall apart. When my father sat across from me at the table, the silence was unbearable. Finally, he spoke. He told me he'd been helping my ex-girlfriend clear some things off her phone. That sentence alone made my skin crawl. He said he'd stumbled across messages between her and the man she'd cheated on me with. Messages full of guilt. Messages about how she'd ruined my life. Messages where she said she wished she could take it all back. I stared at him, unable to speak. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed everything at once. Relief, rage, validation, betrayal. The truth I'd been screaming into the void for years had finally found its voice, and it was standing in my kitchen. But something didn't sit right. Why was he still in contact with her? Why was he helping her with anything at all? Why now? I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But trust isn't a switch you flip back on after it's been shattered. He said he hadn't confronted her, that he wasn't ready to stir up old drama, that once he knew the truth, he started looking for me, to tell me he believed me. I didn't ask how he found me. I didn't want to know. All I knew was that my safe, quiet life had just been invaded by a ghost I thought I'd buried. When he finally left, I locked the door and leaned against it, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor again. Noah wrapped his arms around me, and for the first time since that knock, I let myself cry. Not just for what I'd lost, but for the painful, complicated closure I didn't know if I wanted, because the truth had finally surfaced, and I wasn't sure it made anything better. I didn't sleep that night. After my father left, after the house went quiet again, after Noah checked on the twins one more time and whispered that everything was okay, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to my own thoughts circle like vultures. The truth had finally come out, and somehow it didn't feel like freedom. The next day, I took time off work. I walked aimlessly through unfamiliar streets, letting the cold air burn my lungs, trying to separate facts from feelings. Fact: my father had admitted the accusation was false. Fact: my parents disowned me without proof. Fact: I rebuilt my life without them. Fact: my children were safe, loved, and happy. What I couldn't figure out was this: did the truth obligate me to forgive? Online, strangers pointed out what I'd been too overwhelmed to name. Why was my father still in contact with the woman who ruined my life? Why was he helping her with her phone? Why did it take years and an accident for him to finally believe me? By the end of the day, my decision was clear. I wasn't opening that door again. I met my father at a small hotel cafe and told him calmly, without drama, that I would not reconcile. Not now, not later, not ever. He cried. Real tears, not performative ones. He said he understood. He told me he'd informed my mother of the truth and cut my ex-girlfriend out of the family completely. He said my mother hadn't handled it well, had begged for my number, but he hadn't given it to her. I listened, and I believed. Just enough to let go. Not forgive, not forget. Just let go. When I returned home, my son asked who had knocked on the door that night. I told him it was a colleague. One day, when they're older, if they ever face injustice themselves, I'll tell them the truth. So they know I understand. So they know they can always come to me. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Months later, my family broke a boundary they'd promised to respect. It reignited something in me, something colder, clearer. I realized I didn't want distance anymore. I wanted closure on my terms. So I flew back to my home country. I met them all. My mother, my father, my brother, even my ex-girlfriend. I was nervous walking into that room, but the shock came when I realized I didn't feel love or hatred. I felt nothing. My mother cried and apologized. I felt disgust, not sympathy. My father tried to explain again. My brother surprised me by saying he'd tried to help. Hundreds of calls, offers of money, messages I'd never seen. Then the truth landed like a final punch. My mother had blocked my contacts on the phone plan. She'd cut me off from the only person who'd tried to save me. And then my ex-girlfriend spoke. She said she was scared. She said therapy had made her feel guilty. She said she'd never stopped loving me. She asked for another chance. I almost laughed. Instead, I pulled out my phone. I showed them my life, my children's first steps, their birthdays, our family trips, photos of Noah holding me the way I'd once begged the world to. This, I said calmly, is what you lost. My ex reached for my hand. I pulled away. I walked out of that room knowing something important. I hadn't gone too far. Compared to what they'd done to me, I'd been merciful. I met my old best friend before leaving. He hugged me like no time had passed. I promised myself I'd return one day to show my kids where half their history comes from. But my family? They won't be part of that story. I've decided to allow my brother to visit one day, to meet his niece and nephew, slowly, carefully, with boundaries that don't bend. Because I learned this the hard way. Truth doesn't erase betrayal. Apologies don't undo abandonment. And family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands by you when the lie is loudest.